Hey everyone, welcome to a special Edge of Wonder Friday Night Live edition. So, do people have implanted biochips inside their bodies without knowing about it? Real biochip implants and Havana Syndrome are about to get exposed on the special Friday Night Live interview with me, your host, Ben Chasteen, and my very special guest, Jesse Beltran. We'll discuss how many people could be chipped, including military personnel and civilians. But the deeper questions are, how are people getting chipped and for what purpose? So Jesse was a paramedic and is now a certified master hypnotherapist with over 10 years of experience. So hear all of his information tonight. You guys are going to be blown away by what we're going to present in this episode with real evidence, actual photos of these chips and everything else. But first, be sure not to miss this week's Mandela Effect, or, the Mandela Effect segment that we call Mandela Effect, about the missing Bolton dinosaur. This one was really weird. Later during the Rise.tv exclusive Dig Deep live Q&A segment, you can ask me your questions directly along with Jesse, who's going to be with me. We'll take your questions directly in our live chat that we have exclusively on Rise TV. And in the fan favorite top 10 weirder than news of the week, hear hilarious and intriguing stories such as the zoo that lets you send a crappy Valentine's greeting to your ex, a 1,500-year-old hidden Bible unearthed in the Vatican, a giant creepy alien face discovered in Antarctica, and a massive great white shark found half-eaten on a beach, and more. And as always, we'll see you out on the edge. And by the way, if you're listening to our Edge of Wonder podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or elsewhere, please leave us a 5-star rating and review. And also remember, hit follow, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Comment below. So I hope everyone's having a wonderful week. Both Rob and I have been traveling, and I just happened to be in person with Jesse here in Florida and Tampa, and who came to visit this area. And I've been on a previous show with him, and his information, seriously, you guys are going to be blown away by this interview, and we're live. So it's super exciting. So it just kind of worked out. Rob couldn't be on today, and then it worked out with having Jesse here. So he'll be on soon. But first, we'll just do the regular show to begin with. We always do something kind of funny, interesting, weird. So this is one of these TikTok videos that was floating around. So Lindsay, you want to pull this up? Lindsay and Dom are both here with us too. So it'll be a good show tonight, you guys.
The Department of Government. See, we were looking over last year's budget and we found some anomalies that we wanted to address. Okay, if you're talking about the military budget, if you want a safe country, that's how much we... Oh, we didn't even start looking at that yet. Get ready for that. No, we were looking at this list here. We wanted to start with the National Pillow Fluffing Initiative. I mean, don't you want your pillow to be fluffy? Not when you're spending over $1 million of taxpayer money. We're cutting that. Also, the Bureau of Elevator Music Standards. Explain yourself. Forgive me for trying to set the vibe, bro. $800,000 a year. The National Velcro Noise Study. What's the problem here? You don't have to spend $1 million a year to know that Velcro noise is annoying. Now, the Program of Ice Cube Uniformity and the American Cloud Watching Fund. Okay, that one's a problem, but I'm kind of OCD and I like it when my ice cubes are all the same size and shape.
Dude, these are crazy.
We all do, but that doesn't mean you spend $1 million. Now, the Federal Kazoo Orchestra Grant. It's amazing what they could do with those things, honestly. The Federal Bureau of Traffic Cone Counting, $256,343. You're welcome. Now, that's what I call $800,000 well spent.
Oh my gosh. That reminds me of Garden State. If anyone's seen that movie, like one of his friends makes like millions of dollars because he invents silent Velcro. So anyway, it just kind of reminds me of that. It's like what they also, what was that one? There was a report that came out that they spent like $150,000 to see if Thanos could actually snap his fingers. So and these are all the things that our taxpayers are paying for. So it's ridiculous. Anyway. So I'd like to hear all your guys' thoughts on that one. But why don't we get into the weekly Bendella effect here, because this one is very strange. All right, the Bolton dinosaur. This one is very, very strange. There was supposedly a huge dinosaur skeleton in the Bolton Museum in 1960s. However, there is no huge dinosaur skeleton in the Bolton Museum since the 60s. But a lot of people remember this. And there's even media that have asked what happened to the giant skeleton. In 2006, there was an edition of the Bolton News that made an appeal for information related to the missing dinosaur. And it seriously feels like this is like some kind of plot to a movie or something like that. Many people who visited the museum remember seeing this giant, huge skeleton of this dinosaur. However, according to the museum, there's no records of it even existing, let alone somebody stealing it. So this article goes into this, and it says, so this is from the leader of the local council, this guy named Alan. He says, am I supposed to accept that my eyes deceive me, or this enormous dinosaur was a figment of my imagination? I remember as a schoolboy going on visits to the museum and standing in awe looking at it. I raised the matter when I was on the arts committee, but we were never able to find any trace of it. And then there was also another, Stephanie was also on the Bolton Council. She said, quote, there have been stories and questions about this dinosaur skeleton over the last 20 to 30 years, but there are no records of Bolton Museum ever having owned such a skeleton. The museum service have some photographs of the galleries in the 30s when it opened, but there is no gigantic dinosaur. Meaning, like, people remember it there, but it's not even in the photos. It's not even in the museum history about it. So this one was really, really weird. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys are from that area or if your parents grew up in that area. I'm not even sure where this Bolton Museum is. But Lindsay, do you know? Can you look that up real quick? Where is this Bolton Museum?
I'm having trouble. Might be in the UK, but I also found this article about a Bolton Museum dinosaur looking for a new name, and they have a photo. So I'm not sure if this is the same.
No, this isn't it. That's not the one. It's definitely, yeah. I mean, because they have a couple of them, but I guess this was like the biggest one that they had reportedly, and it's just not there. So, and it was at the entrance of the museum. That's the other thing that's really weird. So, I don't know. So weird, right? They didn't say what kind of dinosaur it was. Like I didn't see an actual report on what it was. I mean, my impression was like a T-Rex or something, or maybe a Brontosaurus. Not sure. Super weird in any case. Very, very strange. Well,
Can you give us a comment in the chat if you think that Ben is frozen? I'm trying to figure out if it's me or him. I think Ben is frozen. Yep, looks like he is. Let's give him a minute to figure this out, and we'll get this show back going. All right, everyone. Looks like Ben's internet went out, but he's getting right back on, so we'll give him a minute or two. And this gives us a good chance to keep chatting in the Rise TV live chat. In the meantime, I'm going to play a trailer, and we'll get back here soon enough.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Hey, good timing. I was just about to play a trailer, Ben.
Okay, sorry guys. We're having some there's some weird things going on with Wi-Fi here, but Jesse says this happens to him a lot. He tries to come on. So hopefully you just have positive and righteous thoughts about this, that everything will work out. So okay, why don't we show a trailer and then we'll come back and I'll have Jesse on.
Part ape. Part human hybrid. Cyborgs and Terminator technology already existing. Sentient robots becoming indistinguishable from people. No, it's not the plot of the newest Matrix movie. This is our reality, a transhumanist one. How does transcending humanism tie into eugenics, Darwinism, and even cloning? Is there any part of our world that transhumanism hasn't touched? Is resistance futile? How can we rage against the machine?
Hey guys, welcome back to the show with my host Jesse Beltran, and it's great to have you here.
Thanks.
And why don't we just kind of before you just kind of tell your story, why don't we just jump right into this? What is going on with these chips? How did, for one, what made you start getting into this whole field? And then you can kind of tell the story about a little bit of who you are and how you kind of came into this, and then leading up into what's going on in today's world.
Yeah.
I mean, the information you have is pretty much some of the most shocking stuff that I've seen in a long time doing Edge of Wonder.
Yeah.
So,
well, it really has been considered a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist.
right.
Theory
Mm-hmm.
up until recently, when on May 8th of 2024, the Department of Homeland Security held a hearing, and a gentleman by the name of Lieutenant Greg Egren gave testimony about a phenomenon that was happening in Havana, Cuba, which was deemed the Havana Syndrome.
Right.
But now it's been relabeled as anomalous health incidences. And basically what was happening is our diplomats in Havana, Cuba, were having these strange acute onsets of sounds being emitted internally within their head, and followed by severe pain, vertigo, nausea, vomiting, brain fog, short-term, long-term memory loss. Ultimately, they found out that there was actual brain injuries.
Wow.
Multiple, very similar to what concussion syndromes would be like. How I got involved is I met a gentleman by the name of Dr. John Hall in Austin, Texas. I was at a conference one time, and we got on this topic about how he was seeing people back in about 2010, civilians here in the United States, who were having the exact same symptoms. And so I said, well, why isn't anything being done about it? And he expressed to me is that because if they went to their general practitioner, like everyone is conditioned to do, they were being misdiagnosed. They were being railroaded into the mental health industry, forced on medications, and further being re-victimized again.
Mm-hmm.
So he was doing, because they were talking about hearing this strange signal, he was doing intermittent RF scanning around their person. And
what's RF scanning?
It's a radio frequency scan. And what he was using was a device that is similar to what Melinda Kidder, who was a famous private investigator involved in the Iran-Contra scandal. And she was doing similar type testing. And he utilized the JM20 Pro, which is a general frequency counter detector. And he was coming up positive around a person's at very specific focal areas on the human body. And so I said, well, isn't that enough? And he said, no, it just isn't helping. So I decided to, with the help of two other gentlemen, to create an organization called the International Center Against the Abuse of Covert Technologies back then. And I called a meeting in Sacramento, California, asking anyone having these symptoms, please come, we want to talk to you. I imagine maybe 6 people would show up, but 100 people showed up, all expressing the exact same symptoms and complaints.
Wow.
Yeah. And what followed that is I said, well, we're onto something. And so we started to do radio frequency testing on a mass scale. And our first test was done in Davis, California, and we had 300 people showed up. Yeah. Yeah.
Out of like the 300 people, how many tested positive?
At that point, we were around the 60% ratio.
Really?
And the people who had a higher propensity were people who were symptomatic. And then you had people who were just really curious on whether or not this phenomenon might be happening to them. But in that data, what was interesting, and I thought it was an assault on specific races, because the people who were most prevalent to suffer from this were Caucasian females in their 40s, highly educated, recently single, widowed, or divorced. Then it was Caucasian males and African-American females, African-American males, Asians, Hispanics, and it dwindled down from there. And then we did the same testing in the Midwest with the same results until we got to the East Coast in Chicago area. It flipped, the African-American and Caucasian criteria flipped, and that remained constant all the way to the East Coast until we got to Virginia, where a group of about 100 military subcontractors found out what I was doing and asked me to come and test them. And that's where things kind of took a turn, because I became a master hypnotherapist for a reason. I noticed that the people who were really, really suffering, like doctors, lawyers, were losing $1 million businesses, is because they were highly susceptible to suggestibility. We suspected that there had to be something unique about the individual in order for them to receive the signal, because people were coming up positive at very specific focal areas. And there were 3 criteria. You had the general population, which we call AHIs today. You can superimpose their scans over each other and they line up.
Really?
Yeah. And then you had the military population that you can superimpose them over each other and they lined up. And then you had a third population, which was those who had been incarcerated. And you can superimpose their scans over each other and they lined up. But and it's not surprising with the incarcerated population, because the United States has used that population as guinea pigs throughout history.
It's true.
Yeah.
How are people even getting these implants?
So in 2010, 2011, this was being done very purposely with injections. So people were coming up positive in the temporomandibular joint areas, and typically, and we have MRI scans of people who have had surgical implants removed in the TMJ area with a traditional RFID chip that looks like a large size grain of rice.
And we have some of those, right?
Yes, we do.
Lindsay, can you pull up some of these? So these are...
Well, actually, those are the nano, what we're now approaching nano size. Yeah, so...
That's the day, because the stuff you're talking about is really from like the... was it from like the 90s and early 2000s?
So we know through a Freedom of Information Act that the U.S. military was implanting veterans, our military personnel, with the large grain of rice.
And by the way, these are actual images of chips. Like what you're seeing right now, you guys, these are real images. These aren't like, recreations or anything else. These are chips that were found in people that look like some kind of like organic matter. But when you like we'll talk about like like what happens or what's inside of these and how do you know that these are
so
chips?
what you're showing right now are biosensors, and they have nanowires that are being protruding out of them. Our bodies don't reject them, and so our bodies will basically encapsulate them. But in the photomicrographic studies, in the reports, it actually talks about these being analyzed through chain of custody after they've been surgically removed. And these are actually biosensor implants. So these are electronic devices that have been embedded in people.
Jesus,
yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of people probably want to know too. I mean, one, you know, because it sounds like, you know, originally it's like, oh, it seems like only military personnel would be chipped or something, or people that have been incarcerated. But then it's like now it could be anybody, right? And it's like, what could be the symptoms of, you know, like what would someone look for if they feel like they are chipped?
Yeah. So there's two parts to your statement there. The first part is the history on how the progression of this technology has migrated into what it is today. So in the early 80s and 90s, we were getting down to a smaller grain of rice, your traditional RFID tracking type chips. Down into the late 90s, there's a case, it's called the Larson case. And that was a politician down in Southern California who had over 10 of these biosensors removed from him. He started having this phenomenon, the electrical shocks to the extremities, auditory symptoms, which people now, you might hear V2K, the microwave auditory effect or the Frey effect. And basically what this does, it induces this weird sound into your head, including voices. And he had, like I said, 10 of these removed. He sued. It was thrown out of court by the judge because he inadvertently signed up to be part of an experiment. And this is part of our fight too, when we educate the general population, is that when you're involved in an experiment, you must be given full, in order for you to give full consent, you have to be fully informed about what you're entering into. And he was not. And Mr. Larson would never have participated in that if he did not, if he would have known. Then they were approaching literally the size of 2 letters on a penny. And
Lindsay, I just sent you a photo. Can you show that photo that I just messaged you? And this is what he's talking about right now. So go ahead.
Yeah, so they're down to the size of 2 letters on a penny. Now they're even smaller. The case that we talk about that we have is the Bonnie Kellerby case, which he's finally allowed us to take away the redactions and show everyone these biosensors that were surgically removed from her in 2018. And there was 3 of them. But she went through the preliminary RF scan, then got a nonlinear junction scan, which we can talk about what that entails.
Yeah, that's what I'm curious.
Yeah, and got toxicology reports, checked the little level of metals within her system, and then ultimately having medical imagery and ultimately having surgical excision of these. And then they were, through chain of custody, they were sent to a lab and they were identified. But that's the Dave Larson case. You can see there that they are down.
I gotta show it. Let me see. I kind of messed up, but I thought I was sending it to Lindsay. But we're gonna show this right. Yeah. So here we go. So this is what you were talking about, right? Like
yes.
This is like.
So in that top left frame, you can see that is a electronic biosensor. And look at the letters on the size of that penny, and that gives you a good indication of how small these are. But today we're even smaller than that. We're now in the nano size. And a nano is 1/1,000,000th of a centimeter. So you can't even identify these with traditional medical imagery. Really, it has to be taken to a lab, and you have to use these very sophisticated high power spectrum microscopes in order to identify these things.
Dude, that is crazy.
Yeah. But what's even crazier is what the technology does.
And that's what, I mean, I think that's the question that's on everyone's mind. Like, what's the purpose of this?
So this would be considered a neuro weapon. President Putin gave a interview on the Politico, and he said the first superpower to master psychotronic weapons will be the superpower to rule the world. Now, in 2010, 2011, I believe, along with Dr. John Hall, is that we were in the experimental phase up until about 2015, and then it really ramped up. But where we are today, because Colonel Egren gave testimony on that May 8th hearing at the Department of Homeland Security, that this is taking out the best of our best. Not only is it taking out our very talented U.S. diplomats, it's taking out the best of our best in the CIA, it's taking out the best of our best in the FBI. Now it's happening to congressional members in Washington, D.C. So we wouldn't be doing this to our own. So I think we've been hijacked, and I think we're in a new type of war. And that's what all the data is really indicating. But that's just one aspect of this.
Right.
The other aspect of it, which is more damaging, is the neuro rights aspect of this. There's a New World Vistas report that I sent, and there's some shorts, and I have some highlighted areas. But if you read the highlighted areas, it talks about the capabilities. And the New World Vistas report was a report that was disseminated in November 24th of 1994. And it was
96.
96?
Yeah.
96, 94. 94. It was 94.
Okay, well, because
we obtained it in 1995.
Oh, okay.
We have obtained it in 1995, but it was done in 1994.
Okay.
Yes.
Was it released in 96 maybe?
No, 94.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was basically the coming together of all our greatest minds in the United States Air Force in order to create a methodology that would keep us a superpower 50 years into the future. And in this report, it talks about how you can embed memories into people. Take a memory set from one brain and embed it into another. Create false memories. How you can, they utilize this technology in Desert Storm, where they were sending the voice of Allah,
voice of God technology,
into people's heads, and they were just giving up in droves because they thought they were hearing their higher power tell them to give up, surrender.
Basically, yes.
Yeah. So if you think about this, this would be the ultimate weapon. Colonel Egren said that this is a silent kill. This is meant to make a person over long duration look like they're crazy. He even said that if you put him in a skiff, he'll tell you exactly who to subpoena, what doors to knock down, and who to go after. So the bottom line is this. We are now in an era where technology has not kept up with our laws. And there are some states here that are trying to at least tread towards the right direction, and where they're creating laws that will protect your rights, your neuro rights, your thoughts, everything that you think about with this technology is no longer private. So I joke about this, to a lot of guys, and I said, for you guys who are married, when your wife asks you if she's fat in this dress, think about this. You're no longer going to be able to lie. So, and that's in simple context.
Wow.
But they're actually talking about using the incarceration system, using this technology, and where they can, if you commit a crime, they would use this technology on you, embed false memories, make you think that you've been in prison over long terms of time for a crime, feel your victim's experience, and then bring your family in for family therapy and tell them how to do with your new memory sets that they've embedded in you. This is how far-fetched this is going.
Insane. Well, it's it kind of reminds me of Minority Report.
It's exactly what it is.
Yeah. I mean, except it's like, you don't remember serving time, but it's like, the whole thing is like, oh, we're going to stop crimes before they happen because we can, like, we know everything, like we know your every move before you even make it. And I mean, that's where I feel like with these chips, I mean, it's like, this is weird to talk about, but I mean, this has happened to me 4 or 5 times, and I bring this up on the show quite a bit, but it's like, I will think something. I won't say anything out loud. You know, I mean, I give this perfect example where there was an old band I listened to, and like, it was like the very first concert I ever went to when I was a little kid. Never thought about them for like 30 years or something, you know, and then all of a sudden, like, I just randomly just pops in my head, like, oh, this band, blah, 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 you know, and I was like, just thinking the song. Lo and behold, that day or the next day, I go on Facebook and I see an ad for a t-shirt from that band that I haven't thought about for 30 years, didn't play the music, didn't say it out loud. And I'm just like, dude, I don't know what the heck is going on.
So there's a term for that. It's called neuromarketing. So in 2005, when then Senator, oh gosh, I'm going blank right now, Biden, then Senator Biden, when they're doing the confirmation hearing for Roberts, Biden, and I paraphrase him, but this is almost exactly what he says. He says, mark my words, during your lifetime, you're going to have to decide whether it's constitutional to implant a microchip into a human being and whether that would be constitutional or not. Then Dr. Francis Collins, who is was formerly the head of NIH, said and gave testimony also at a different hearing saying they're finding these weird things in MRI scans. They call them UBOs, unidentified bright objects. And I quote him.
Unidentified bright objects,
yep.
Like inside the body, you're saying?
In the MRI scans.
Yeah, because I've seen those images, and it does look like there's like a little white bright spot, and that's what the chips are, correct?
And that is correct. And he says, do you want one in your brain? Well, you might. And he talks about someone's going to have to decide whether or not you get the microchip that says you're going to be a doctor, or you're going to be a police officer, or you're going to be a sanitary technician. This is where they're going with this technology. And society has basically been burying their heads in the ground while these tech companies and military organizations like DARPA, IBM, Qualcomm, all of these big corporations are really fine-tuning this technology. And what is happening is they're really changing what being human is. And with this nanotech, which is self-replicating, self-assembling,
it's like coming into more transhumanism,
crosses the blood-brain barrier. And in studies in academia, they're now saying that with this nanotech, the main census is within 6 generations, you can change a species. There are some doctors out there like Dr. Hildegard Staninger, Dr. Rima LeBeau, say that you can do this in 1 generation. And I did a interview called The Celestial Report. And after I showed her all of the evidence and basically the cases where we're surgically pulling out these biosensors out of people, she said that in the early 2000s, late 90s, they redefined what being human is. And so I always thought in the back of my head, what was the purpose? So if you change a species genetically, particularly the human species, and they're no longer considered human, guess what? Who owns you?
I mean, and I feel like they've been doing this for a long time, and not just like trying to get us more of like these like robotic aspects, but just like distance us from the divine as much as possible. You know, it's like implementing things, doing things that even go against the very nature of what God would be, even just as simple as atheism, but doing this a lot more to degrade humans even more. So then it's like, oh, you guys aren't even classified as humans anymore. Now you're just animals. We can just do whatever we want because you don't, it's like, here's a standard for being human. And it's like, even though it's kind of their fault, but it's like, oh, we've just pushed you down here. And it's like, you know, I mean, they just call us cattle or whatever.
Well, here's something more profound.
Yeah.
You talked about calling us animals.
Mm-hmm.
Animals have more rights than we do.
Interesting.
They do.
Scary.
Yeah, animals have more rights than we do.
They don't pay taxes.
Well, you know, we're the and here's another profound statement.
That's why we're
we're the only species that has to pay to live.
I know. Hopefully, all of that will change here coming soon. A lot has been going on. Are certain individuals being targeted, or is it just like, could it just be anybody? How are they also doing this? Is it through could it be through surgeries? Could it be through foods? Is it through vaccines? Is it through abduction cases?
So that's a huge statement that covers a lot of topics. So number one, there are studies out there right now, particularly with the lidocaine derivative, under high-powered microscopes. They're actually finding the nanotech in it, evenly dispersed. And what's interesting, you expose it to RF frequencies, they will self-assemble into a microchip array. Yeah. So it's already being utilized. And if you think about, listen to marketing in women's makeup, just products out there, health products, they're talking about, it has special nanotech in it, as it's something really cool. But really think about that. If this nanotech can be guided throughout your body just by sending a specific radio frequency to it, what can't be done? But it's your government. Yeah. And everyone trusts your government. Would you trust them with your memories? Would you trust them with embedding memories into your brain? That is the question that needs to be asked to everyone in society. And the thing is right now, it is so imperative in the experience of being human, in the human experience, that everyone really wakes up and gathers together and really takes a stand when it comes to this tech and the right to preserve your brain, your own thoughts, your own autonomy, because that's going away. And it's and I'm telling everyone right now, that's the agenda, and they're full speed ahead of it, and they're very confident that they can get away with it. But it's important that you speak up and you have your voice heard, because this is not about us at this point. I think it's too late, but it's about the generations to come, your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. That's really what this is about.
Well, guys, we're going to come right back. We're going to show a trailer, and then when we get back, we'll jump right back into this conversation. So, be right back.
I didn't want to go public without evidence because I knew no one would believe me. The entire incident happened about 5 to 6 minutes in total. And my mom shouts really loud, "Oh my God, what is that? What is that?" At no point did the two men in black or the Air Force gentleman ask my mother or her friends what did they see. They looked human, but they did weird things. The men in black, they said, "You will report it as a helicopter crash, or we will take your son away." The men in black play the narrative and the media outlets spew it back out. This was 1991, Project Mockingbird in full effect.
Well, you guys, you can find that over on our rise.tv platform, along with almost nearly 1,000 videos over there that Rob and I have done over the years. And that's just one of many phenomenal interviews. This is also a phenomenal interview. Again, I'm with Jesse Beltran, who has this whole background on all these Covert Biochip Implants. But yeah, Lindsay's showing our website right now over on rise.tv for just $12.99. You can come over and support what we do, because we have so many videos pretty much on almost any topic you can possibly think of. And if you haven't joined us, you can go to rise.tv/video to get a free video. All we need is your email. Just email us, or just type in your email, and we'll email you a link to watch our video on divine inspiration and winter miracles, which is such a positive video that we created. So great. So, all right, Jesse, before we kind of jump into some other stuff here, there was a military guy that I was ended up talking to for a while, and he was in Florida, and I would see him sometimes in cafes and stuff. And so I started talking to him, and I like to ask this question to a lot of like former military, especially if they kind of recently came out from the military. And I asked him, what was the craziest thing that you've ever experienced? And he got really quiet, and he's just said, he's like, this sounds crazy, but he said there was a helicopter, and he's like, there's no instrument panels on this helicopter. And it's like, it's very different. And the pilot would sit there, and it's like a device that they put on their head, and they can interact with the helicopter. So it's like, they're flying it with their mind. And it was this super advanced AI program that they were using. But he said the problem was, and he said this was back in 2016, so they might have like figured out this, but he said it was like a two-way street. What they were finding was that the AI was sending information into the pilot's brain, and they literally had to shut down the program. And he's like, I swear to you, this happened. He's like, I actually saw this. He said he wasn't in the helicopter, but he saw the whole thing being used. And he said that everybody who was witnessing this was like, this is like totally futuristic, insane stuff, And it makes me wonder then, it's like, if this is what they would be moving to, like, oh, we can just put a chip in your brain, and it's like you can walk in your house and be like, okay, turn on. I mean, this is, I feel like, what Neuralink is kind of trying to do, but this is taking it to a whole different level.
Well, that's funny you should say that, because I used to live in Issaquah, Washington, which is home of Microsoft, and I had the opportunity. I wasn't supposed to be in this room, but it was called the Future Room, 50 years into the future. And you could literally put on that headset, and you can control everything in your environment. Think about turning on the television, the lights, the air conditioning. And did some very interesting things. And he talks about this remotely controlling aircraft with your mind. So this is not science fiction. It's real. It's here and it's now. And what's interesting, in a lot of the victims that experience AHIs also talked about this interaction with this, which they call AI bots. And in our surveys that we gather all this data, it's very consistent. A lot of the people that have the same symptoms as the Havana Syndrome do complain about this. And just so people understand just how on point we are, about 3.5 months ago, I had the head doctor of a 3-letter agency. I promised I would never give his name. He made me do that. And he called me because he said there was significant overlap, meaning the symptoms were identical. He said, there's one difference. He goes, you're pulling out implants. And I'm intrigued. And he wanted to know more about what we were doing. So I only reached out because I was concerned for the federal employees who were suffering from this, knowing I had already been given word that they don't know what to do for them. And I just wanted to give them some insight about what Dr. Hall, myself, were doing back in 2010, 2011, covering civilians who were suffering from this, and now surgically removing implants. And it was just to help them and give them some feedback that, because it is outside the scope of medicine, this is more technological based, where those in traditional medicine would never do something like this to test them for it. Yeah.
I kind of want to go back to your story and again, how your journey led you through all of this, if you're comfortable kind of telling your story.
Yeah. I think where I need to start off is why I think I'm doing this. I think, I say that, I think everyone has a purpose and everyone has a mission. When I was 6 years old, I was 5, 6 years old, I had a tonsillectomy, and everything went fine. My mother and father took me up, went to check me out of the hospital. The doctor said, just feed him ice cream. And I was happy. So I go home.
Answer to everything.
Yeah. I go home. I had a little twin-size bed and go to bed that night eating my ice cream. And then I wake up in the morning. And when I woke up to my bed sheet completely covered in blood. Not one spot was white other than the area that I had slept in. And as soon as I saw it as a 6-year-old, I yelled for my mother, and then I started to hemorrhage nonstop. My father, they put me in a blanket, tried to get me to, took me to the bathroom, hoping he would stop. Didn't. He threw me in the back on the floorboard of his 57 Chevy as I'm continuing to hemorrhage on this blanket. And my mother called ahead to the hospital saying that he was coming. He drove through every red light, got to the hospital. And my dad's not a man. He's a very proud man who cries. But he had me in his arms, and he's in tears, and he's saying, please save my son. And they threw me on the gurney, rushed me to the OR. They say, we're losing him. And then I had an OBE. I flew, I remember floating to the left-hand corner of the operating room.
Out-of-body experience.
Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm. And they're doing CPR on me. And then eventually it went black. And I see the light. And I go to the light. And when I got to that light, it was the most incredible experience that I think anyone could have. And I tell everyone, who are the two most important people to a 5 or 6-year-old? It's your mom and dad. That's the kind of love you have. Mm-hmm. Well, this love was infinitely more than that. And I didn't want to come home. Mm-hmm. I wanted to stay there.
I know. I've had my own experience with that too.
Yeah,
so I understand.
So you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
A male voice said to me, and I believe it was God, I'm sorry you have to go back. It's not your time. And I started to cry and throw a tantrum. I said, no, I don't want to go back. I wanted to stay.
It's so peaceful and beautiful.
Yeah.
I know the feeling.
Yeah. And he goes, I'm sorry you have to go back. And then I remember falling. And boom. They said, we got him back. So it left some philosophical questions in my mind as I got older, because we're told the human experience is what makes us special, is we have free will. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, if we have free will, then why wasn't that little boy allowed to stay there? And I've never been able to overcome that until what we're doing today. Right now, there are no resources for the civilian population. They're only acknowledging that the federal population is going through this. But we have proof positive that this is happening to civilians, and it's happening at a massive scale. In fact, Colonel Eggerin says it's happening on every continent except for Antarctica. So I think God is the ultimate programmer, and God knew why I had to come back.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
it's like you
and
have
so
fulfill.
that's why I'm here. This is what I'm doing today, along with my great team. We have Desiree Foley and Mike Grady, mm-hmm. who over the last, what we've done and accomplished in 6 months has just been incredible.
Well, and you all have amazing stories. Like Desiree Foley, we actually made a documentary about the secret space program, but the second one was more about advanced tech, and we had her sharing her story. And she's also a victim through all of this too. It's like she actually had evidence that she was chipped. Same thing. She had the documentation. She actually had the photographic evidence of what was in her body and everything else. And we presented it in this episode of our Old World Order series.
Yeah. So I mean, this is frequency based. There's no doubt about it. And we do RF scanning clinics now. In fact, that's why I'm here in Florida. We're doing a clinic here. And we've been on tour. We're in DC, North Carolina. We just left Houston. Now we're here in Tampa, and then we're going back to San Antonio. And then I think we're back to the East Coast again. But the bottom line is there's a methodology in order to prove this, so you don't get labeled as a 5150, which is basically you get thrown in the mental health industry.
Right. And that's like I think that's like the biggest concern. I mean, and that's part of the problem too, when people go through this, because they feel like they're kind of going crazy. And it's like, oh, well, you know, because now I've encountered a lot of people that I know now, like have chips in them, you know, and it's pretty startling to see how many like you said, you know, you tested 300 people and about 60% of them came up positive. I mean, that's high. Yeah. That is really high.
Yeah. What's happening now though, because I took a hiatus and now we're back in this full-fledged, is I think we're dealing with several things. Recently we had a case of a special forces guy, special ops guy, who had this weird experience where typically people will say they had a loss of time. And he had that experience and then started having some auditory symptoms shortly thereafter. So I said, why don't we just do a short RF scan on you? And sure enough, he came up positive, and then we had him go get what's called a nonlinear junction scan, and he came up positive in 6 areas, but that there was a frequency that was detected on him that we haven't seen. And when we looked up who owned that frequency was owned by NATO. And so you have to ask yourself, I thought it was going to be the United States.
Yeah.
Why would NATO own the frequency for one of our special ops guys? So I really think, and it is my belief, that there has been this strong movement for this one world government. And that special ops guy is an asset. And I'm not so sure that the United States was going to be the superpower that it was in this new agenda that is happening. I think with the new change in the administration, we're probably looking at a temporary stall in the agenda, but I think it's going to be coming at us with a vengeance.
Well, hopefully a lot can. I mean, I'm hoping that things will start coming out to the surface. Then again, the more people, it's real. And I feel like it's really the media, you know, granted you have people behind the scenes that are doing bad things, but it's like, you know, if the media just reported things in a fair and balanced way, then more people would be a little bit more aware of what's going on. And I think that's, you know, I do think there was a massive shift, you know, when you look at the last election and how many people are watching the media less and less, you know, like even CNN's talking about they have to start laying off some people. Some of the other media is talking about the same thing. And it's like people, you know, it's like, well, we're tired of just being fed nonsense, you know, correct, lies to us. And I think that's the core of it. So I do think that there has been a shift, but I do think that there needs to be still a lot more to be done to get people aware to the truth of what's
this last administration, and this was from the words of Colonel Egren, has not been forthright. In fact, they've interceded and stopped appropriate investigations with regards to this Havana Syndrome issue.
Really?
Yeah. So I'm hoping with the new changing of the guard, and we're feeling very positive that we're going to get some movement in the right direction. What's so needed right now is that resources for the civilian population must happen. And as we've started these scanning clinics, there are now civilians who are being diagnosed with Havana Syndrome, even though the federal government says doesn't exist. Right. But we do have cases. And what's interesting, when we do RF scans right now, 100% of those who have been diagnosed with Havana Syndrome have come up positive on a radio frequency scan.
And if someone wants to get scanned, how can they reach out to you, or what? Like, it's on your website, correct?
Yeah, go to Mind, M-I-N-D, Nexus, Nexus live.com, and you can see our scanning services. What we're doing is clinics And the reason we're doing that is because we want to get as many people scanned as possible. And then we do one-on-ones for those who are professionals that want to stay anonymous.
So Lindsay, I think when you go to the hamburger thing on the top there, and is it under events or is it?
It should be services.
Services. Sorry. Yeah. There you go. And then testing. Yeah, RF testing, and it will tell you. If you scroll down a little bit, and keep going. I think.
Yep.
Keep going down. It should say where they're doing some of the testing.
That's probably going to be,
anyway, well.
Yeah. Yeah, you can go to the website there.
Somewhere.
Yeah, no, it's there.
But also you can reach out to them through the website and the contacts and everything else. If anybody is interested in being scanned and would like to know more information, definitely reach out to mynexuslive.com. So there's something else I want to bring up. Like, this is there you go, Lindsay.
Yeah.
This whole thing with, I remember the Navy Yard shooter. What's his name? Marion.
No, so Aaron Alexis and Myron May.
Myron May, yeah.
Yeah.
And, when this whole thing happened, specifically with the Navy Yard shooting, the FBI or the media was reporting that he was saying the FBI was like in his head and communicating with him, and he just couldn't handle it anymore. And this is like, sadly, this is what he did.
Yeah.
And you like, what do you have some information on this?
Yeah, he actually contacted me.
Before he
did the shooting. Yeah, he contacted me. He was expressing that he was having all these symptoms, the exact same symptoms that our diplomats in Havana Syndrome, the exact same symptoms that the civilian population that we engage with. He was having all of this, and he wanted help. And I said, unfortunately, this is not a quick fix. We're going to have to go through this long-term process. And what happens when someone is hit with this and they're trying to understand what is going on, you're either two responses. You're either in fight mode or you're flight. And he was a soldier, so he was in fight mode. And I could never have predicted what he did, but he went and killed 16 people at the Navy Yard. And then Myron May was an attorney out of here in Florida who contacted me, same thing. And very shortly after, he went and killed 3 people at the research facility at the university.
Like when someone reaches out to you like that, I know you have no idea that this is something that they're, did he express anything about like he was having violent thoughts to you or anything else?
Well, in the Myron May case, Myron May, when I expressed to him, hey, look, we're going to have to do this, this, and this. And he goes, I ain't got time for that. I got bigger fish to fry. And then, he went and did the shooting. I had no idea that's what he meant. I thought he was going to go after someone legally because he was an attorney.
Yeah.
But I had no idea that he was going to commit murder.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what would you even do? It's not like, would you contact authorities or?
Well, the bottom line, you have to do what's right and use common sense.
Yeah.
If you feel that another life is in danger, then you do the right thing to protect, those lives that are in danger. Mm-hmm. You have to do what you have to do. But in this case, I keep mulling over it. Could I have done anything different? There wasn't anything that I could have done different.
Well, you would have no idea that this is what he was going to do.
Yeah.
And the other thing is probably so many people reaching out to you through this that it's like, it's, you can only give so much time to one person if, you really need help.
Yeah. We get literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of inquiries about this phenomenon. And not just here, I was invited over into Europe. That's when we finally were able to come to conclusion that these frequencies were emitting from the human body. I was invited in order by a government agency to test their diplomats and their families and bring over who I thought suffered from this. And they allowed us to use this research facility that had what's called an anechoic chamber that blocks out these huge frequency spectrums. And when we brought control groups in there, they tested 0. When we brought the symptomatic people who tested positive in the RF scans. We got frequencies in that environment. And that's when we knew we can say, this is emitting from the human body. Now let's go find what it is. And then ultimately that's what led to the surgical removal of biosensors. Yeah.
Yeah, this has been a phenomenal. There's people commenting how amazing this interview is. So it's really amazing to have you here, Jesse. Oh man, I'm just trying to think what else. There's just so much else to talk about. But here's, I mean, granted, people can always like contact your like, for example, go to your website to see, set up an appointment or something like that. But what should someone do if they do believe that they are a victim of this? Like how, like, and like you said, there's very similar symptoms. And like, I even have a friend that I was like kind of talking to about this, and she was like, oh my gosh, like I do have these symptoms, but I never even thought in a million years that I could have a chip inside of me. It's like, what do we do?
Well, if you believe, so if you're having these strange phenomena, particularly in an acute onset of these strange sounds, typically what they describe is as a electromagnetic, almost mechanical sound coming in, or high-pitched ringing, and then eventually it turns into voice transmission. And then you have short-term, long-term memory fog, vertigo, nausea, vomiting, electrical shocks to the extremities. All of these are potential symptoms of an AHI phenomenon. If you think this is what's going on, I would caution you on how you present it if you go to your medical physician. Don't tell them what your theory is. Don't tell them your theory. I tell everyone, don't tell them your theory. Just tell them your symptoms. Let them figure out what your diagnosis is. That's one way. The other way is to start on this path of gathering the data, the evidence. Getting a preliminary RF scan is what we do. Then getting a nonlinear junction scan, which is a different type of scan that tests for ferrous material within your body. And it tests for active or non-active technology. It'll send harmonics and turn them on, and it'll actually extract a frequency from that. Then you're going to have to get toxicology reports. And if you've been in this a long time, maybe medical imagery. Today, you're kind of out of luck if we're in nanotech, because you can ingest it, you can inhale it.
No, this is the scariest part. Yeah. Like I know, when the vaccines came out, Japan got a whole bunch of, they got a massive shipment, and they sent it back to the U.S. because they said, "Oh, we found it's been contaminated because it had metal. It was like
particulates.
Yeah, like really small, amount." And they were kind of like, it was weird because the media reported on it. They didn't really say exactly what they were going to do with it when the Japanese refused to accept it, and then later it was like, oh, they distributed them to the U.S. actually.
Wow.
And then, as we know, just like 6 months later or so, the Japanese prime minister at the time, he was assassinated after that. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not, or if there was some other reason or whatever. But, this has always been one of my concerns. And, and this is a very touchy topic. It's a very censored topic and everything. So we don't really have to get into everything, but it's more of throwing it out there for people to think about.
Here's what really should be thrown out there. If you were to Google what percentage of American medications are made outside the U.S., that's a national security issue.
Almost all of them.
It's 95%.
Yeah, I remember reading this myself.
Yeah. Why would we be letting our enemies make medications for our own civilians?
Like even China.
Yeah.
It's like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah.
And who knows what? And just perfect example. Like here, yeah, Lindsay's pulling this up now. But like perfect example would be the iPhone. In 2016, Bloomberg had a special exclusive report that got leaked to them that the top executives at Apple for the iPhone found that there was a chip inside the iPhone that wasn't in the original design.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't want to tell people about it because they didn't want to create a huge, massive thing, and that the Chinese government was putting in the phones. And then it did get out to the public. So it's like you said, this is one of the dangers of having, why it's good to have, production here in the US instead of outsourcing everywhere, because we have no idea what's happening really.
No. That is probably the biggest pitfall in the United States right now when it comes to national security is our medications. We should be making all of our medications for our citizens here in our homeland, not in some foreign country, particularly a foreign adversary.
Man, wow. Last thing, I guess, to talk about. Do you feel comfortable do you believe that you have a chip?
I don't believe we have medical evidence
that you have a chip in you, correct?
That's why I started. This is personal to me. When I was a firefighter paramedic, actually when I was a paramedic, I was the operations manager, field supervisor, and I covered 4 counties, and I was training someone, and there was a call of a high-speed pursuit that came over the radio, and intuitively I felt something was going to be bad that happened, and so I told the gentleman I was training that we needed to head out in that direction. When we got there, we watched law enforcement pull a guy out of his car and murder him in front of his 4-year-old daughter. I tried to report it. I was a young man and do the right thing, and I was told to keep my mouth shut, otherwise they would kill me or they would blacklist our company. And then ultimately it came to bite me in the A. I went to a dental appointment. I was knocked out after talking about this topic. And when I woke up 4 hours later, I wasn't supposed to be knocked out. I was drowning in my saliva. And when I left, I started to have the high-pitched ringing and the exact same phenomenon that everyone talks about with Havana Syndrome.
And it's in your jaw?
Right. Right, TMJ. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So for you, this is a very personal matter of why you really want to do this.
Correct.
Right.
So, and here's the thing. I'm about the truth, showing the data, and that's why I used a database methodology in order to prove these cases for others, because I understand what they're going through, and I don't wish this on my worst enemy. No one should go through what they're doing to these people, these victims, the federal employees, the civilians. I don't care where you are. This phenomenon is happening on every continent except Antarctica. But the fact is, is that it needs to be addressed. And like I said, God is the ultimate programmer.
I agree.
And I believe that I was sent back, and this is my mission, and I'm going to fulfill it, come hell or high water.
Well, I'm so happy to be a part of this whole thing too, and have you on and, tell our audience here about what's going on. And I just have a feeling there's going to be a lot bigger things in the works, or I know for sure that there is. And so I think that this is going to be a topic that the whole world will be talking about very soon.
Well, that's it. Our agenda is to disseminate this information to the entire population, because here's the reality of it. When we're talking about technology that can embed false memories in you, me being a hypnotherapist, and I can do it without the tech, I can embed a memory in someone and they will believe it, and you can't convince them that they didn't have it. So you have this phenomenon. You have the UFO community where people are being abducted and having implants taken out of them, Dr. Lear. But each one of those implants can be traced back to a biomedical company that's made them. Then you have the MyLab phenomenon, soldiers who believe that they've been abducted by the military or government and implanted. Those implants are obviously traced back to a biomedical or DoD company. And then you have the AHI. These implants are traceable back to biomedical industries. So, and then you look at the Bible. Is this the true mark of the beast that the Bible talks about? I think it encompasses all. So no one is immune to this.
Crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything you want to like what? Okay, I guess if I could just summarize on one question, like, what do you hope to achieve by doing what you're doing? Like, what's your personal goal? You know, if you could like leave here, you know, when it's time for you to leave, like, what do you hope to accomplish by doing what you're doing?
That I hope that I've left a mark in which the human species can still make a choice on whether or not it wants to have the human experience in whatever way it wants to. The main thing is that we're supposed to have free will. Mm-hmm. So that my hope is that I leave that free will and you still have that choice. I hope that's the mark that I leave.
That's great. Jesse, thank you so much.
Yeah.
You guys, we're going to jump over to rise.tv where he's going to answer personal questions that were in our live chat just for another 15 minutes or so. So for those of you that wish to join us, you can join us over on rise.tv for just $12.99 a month. Also, don't forget if you to go to their website, MindNexusLive.com, to get information on if you're interested in being scanned or setting up an appointment. You can email them there. All their contact information is on their website, and they do this all different parts of the country as well. And we're here in Tampa, and you guys are going to be doing it this weekend here in Tampa, Florida. So I came up here for the weekend, so I'm going to be with them as well, kind of taking part and experiencing everything. And in fact, they scanned me. Believe it or not, I came up negative.
That's a good thing.
I had a feeling I would. I was like, I don't know. I feel like I've kind of been invisible to a lot of things most of my life. So it wasn't until I started Edge of Wonder where it's like, yeah, but I don't remember the last time I even went to the hospital or anything like that.
Yeah.
So. All right, you guys. So we'll see you over on rise.tv. Also, I'm going to do the top 10 weirder news of the week along with that. So join us over on rise.tv. So see you over there, everyone.
A tunnel, a bright light, an out-of-body experience. We're told death is the end. But what about people who came back from the brink? All around the world, people report near-death experiences. Strange phenomena, divine beings, miraculous stories of the impossible. Back from certain death. And decades of scientific research into it all. What's so big that it could be the breakthrough of an age? How are consciousness, the brain, and the soul intertwined? Perhaps the great beyond is closer than we think. It's time to get into the undisputable patterns, capturing the attention of scientists, doctors, atheists, priests, moms, and pops. This is bigger than we ever could have imagined. Near-Death Experiences Part 1. Amazing Stories of the Afterlife.
Really good though.
We need these, whatever.
Hey guys, welcome back to rise.tv.